So we were talking about thermal analysis. We said there are limitations in the normal thermal analysis, which is what we call it as cooling curve methods, because wherever the delta H is small for a particular transformation, that cooling curve method does not work out. As a result, particularly solid state transformations have a very small delta H. So hence people have developed two tools where you don't measure the temperatures of a particular material directly, but you measure it in relation to something else. So that will possibly basically enhance the amplitude of the signal that can come out, because you are measuring the differences rather than the actual value of coming from one sample. And these are what we call them as DTA and DSC, differential thermal analysis and differential scanning calorimetry. And in case of DTA, what you basically do is you take two samples. One is treated as a reference, which is a pure metal, let's say, or some kind of an oxide. You can also use it where within the temperature domain of my interest. For example, if I am taking an aluminum, I am interested in finding out the melting point of aluminum. I try to find out a particular reference which does not undergo any transformation from room temperature up to 660, which is the melting point of aluminum, and such a material is used as a reference. And when I use that as a reference and heat both of them at a fixed heating rate, certain heating rate that I can adopt, and when I start heating both of them at a fixed heating rate, both of them start getting heated up at some particular rate, and usually both of them will maintain the same temperature, excepting for some small differences coming because of the CP difference between the two samples. And as a result, you will see that if I plot the temperature difference between these two, in principle the temperature difference between these two until the transformation starts in this particular sample, it will be almost zero, or a slight increase because of some temperature CP difference that is going to come between these two. But the moment I come to this temperature, which is a melting point, suddenly you see that this particular sample starts absorbing a lot of heat. Because it gets absorbing a lot of heat, this fellow starts getting heated up because of the heat that I am providing, whereas this fellow is not getting heated up. So suddenly you will see that there is a temperature difference established between these two, and that temperature difference, if I look at it, you get it as a peak. And this peak can be either a peak like this or a peak like this, depending on whether you are having an exothermic reaction or an endothermic reaction, whether the heat is absorbed or released, depending on the type of transformation, whether it is solid becoming a liquid or a liquid becoming a solid, or one solid becoming another solid, where there may be a heat extraction or heat absorption. And this particular starting point is what we call it as onset. Onset is where the actual transformation is starting, and you always have an offset, and which is where the transformation is over. And this peak always indicates, where you see a peak always indicates a temperature where in principle you have the rate of reaction the maximum. Okay, so peak always indicates where the rate of the transformation d whatever fraction df by dt, let us say, where f is the fraction transformed, because from the onset to the offset the whole material is undergoing the transformation. Okay, and here, though we are talking of temperature, in principle this can be talked in terms of time also. It is during that time interval the transformation is taking place. And within that time interval, this is the start of transformation where the liquid is just starts forming, and here where the liquid is complete. So you will see that there is a peak that is achieved, and by looking at this particular onset of transformation, one can get an idea of what is the transformation temperature. We can not only get the transformation temperature, we can also get the kinetics of this transformation also. For example, what people do is they heat the sample this is delta T versus T, let's say, they heat the sample at various rates. For example, the same sample, if I heat it at different rates such as 10, 20, let's say 40 and 60 Kelvin per minute. And at each of this particular heating rate, I measure what is this onset temperature, which I call it as temperature of transformation. You will see that the temperature of transformation will not be the same for different heating rates. The reason is there is an inertia in the system. As I am heating very fast, then instead of the transformation starting at the equilibrium transformation temperature, it starts at a temperature higher than that. So when this heating rate is close to the equilibrium heating rate, which is very close to 0, let us say, at that temperature, the actual transformation, at that heating rate, the actual transformation temperature is the true equilibrium transformation temperature, which is for example for aluminum, let's say 660 degrees centigrade. If I am heating it faster, it will not be 660, but it will be higher than 660. And if I measure all these, let's say T1, T2, T3, T4, there are certain mathematical approaches that people have taken to give an idea of what is the activation energy for this transformation using what is called a Kissinger plot. Kissinger is a person who has worked on this, and where what we do is we plot ln beta by T whatever peak square versus 1 by T. For example, what we do is for each of the heating rate, I find out what is the transformation temperature, the onset temperature. The onset temperature usually we measure by drawing two tangents, one for this portion, one for this portion, and finding out where these two tangents meet, and that is what is the onset. Sometimes if this transformation is very broad, something like this, then instead of finding out the onset, we use directly the peak itself. Okay, there are certain transformations. For example, if when we come to DSC, you will see that when you take a strained material, let's say rolled copper, and heat it, you will see that the strain gets released and you get a recrystallization happening. This recrystallization happens over a range of temperature. So you get a very broad peak, and as a result it becomes very difficult for you to identify the onset, and people use the peak itself for that. So measure the peak and take the ratio of this, and this ratio gives you a plot like this, where the slope of this gives you what is called E by R, where E is the activation energy for the transformation, whatever the transformation is. So people can not only just find out the transformation temperature, but also find out the kinetics of the transformation, such as what is the activation energy for this transformation, by using this kind of Kissinger plots. So this is a technique which we call it as DTA, and the other technique where is called DSC, where the principle is slightly different, where again it is similar in the sense that you use two sample holders with one reference, one your sample, and again heat both of them at a particular rate, dt by dt. But what you are measuring is your interest here is to maintain the temperature of these two exactly the same. So you try to measure what is the enthalpy that I need to supply to this material in order for the sample to maintain the same temperature as that of the reference. So I am measuring, instead of the temperature differences, what is the enthalpy that is need to be provided in order to maintain the temperature of the sample similar to that of reference. And now what I plot here is not delta T, but dH versus T. So the change. So again here also you will simply see a similar situation, that you will get a peak at the transformation temperature, and because I am measuring the enthalpy, and this is a very sensitive technique for the enthalpies, you can in principle find out solid state transformations, such as, for example, I want to find out what is the temperature where alpha iron changes to gamma iron, which is 9-10 degrees, where the delta H difference is just of the order of few calories or few joules, you will be able to find out. In a DTA, DTA is not so sensitive for such enthalpy changes. So as a result, DTA is not generally used for solid state transformations, whereas DSC is the one which is called differential scanning calorimeter. So where I am finding out the scanning a sample over a function of temperature and finding out the differential in the enthalpy, and that is how we are able to see. And in this particular case, for example, if I take a glass and do this, I usually see a situation like this. If I take a glass, that is what I was talking to you earlier, first order and second order transitions. Glass, if I heat it to take a glass and heat it, at that TG, this glass becomes a liquid. What is glass? Glass is what is called a configurationally frozen supercooled liquid. So as a result, when a liquid is giving you a glass, when I heat the glass, it should become a liquid. And that is what you see at this particular temperature, which is called TG. So there will be no enthalpy associated with this transformation. You will only see it as just a step in terms of dH by dt. And this step corresponds to a change in the Cp. So if I now plot Cp versus temperature, you will see that there is a discontinuity there. So there is a small step difference, and when I now further heat it at a particular temperature called Tx, this liquid undergoes a crystal transformation. So this glass becomes a liquid, which we call it as a supercooled liquid. You may say, what is this, sir? This liquid is on heating giving you a crystal. Usually we have liquid on cooling giving you a crystal at the melting point. Whereas here you see this liquid on heating is giving a crystal. The reason is this is not a stable liquid. It's a supercooled metastable liquid. And in principle, if I heat this crystal further, at the melting point, this will again become a stable liquid. So that is where you will see, if I further heat this at some melting point, you will see this one gives you a peak like this. And if you carefully observe, this is a peak which is an exothermic peak, and this is an endothermic peak. Why? Because here a supercooled liquid is undergoing a crystal transformation. When a liquid goes to a crystal, the heat is evolved, and here it is the crystal which is undergoing a melting, and as a result this is an endothermic. So this is what is the melting point, Tm, and this is what we call it as a Tx. And any glass, if you take and do the such a DSC, you will be able to find out. And again, by looking at this Tx and doing at various heating rates, I am able to find out how the what is called the kinetics of such a crystallization. We call this as a crystallization of a glass. So the kinetics of crystallization can be found out, and we can find out what is the activation barrier for crystallization and things like that by doing a thing. So this is a technique where you can see that I use the enthalpy differences, and from that you can find out. Of course, one need to do a calibration to be able to know whether this area, where do I get the enthalpy from? It is this particular thing only tells me what is the temperature at which this transformation is taking place. But if I look at the area under this peak, the area under this peak will give me what is the delta H. And this, in order to be able to get this delta H correctly, what we do is we take certain standards, such as, for example, zinc standards, and then nickel standard. Various standards are available for various melting point ranges. For each of them, I know what is the delta H of fusion. So if I take a particular material of a fixed weight, let's say I take one important point that I need to mention is that in DSC, the weight of the sample that we usually use is ranges in the around 20 to about 40 milligrams. So we don't use very large quantities here. That's one of the limitations of DSC. Like a TEM, I'm seeing a small region and thinking that it is representing the whole sample. Again here also I'm picking up a small piece out of the whole alloy, and that piece being such a small piece, I'm thinking that that is representing the whole sample. That problem still exists with the DSC. And DTA you can slightly take larger quantities, but anyway that is not sensitive to enthalpies, so you will not be able to measure the enthalpies very well. So but DSC has that advantage of measuring the enthalpies, but you still use small quantities. So you use a fixed weight of the standard sample and find out what is the area under the peak at a particular heating rate, and that area under the peak you can correlate it to the enthalpy of fusion, because you already know the enthalpy of fusion. Now if you put an unknown sample from the area under the peak that you get, you will be able to find out what is the heat of transformation, whatever transformation that it is, whether it is alpha iron going to gamma iron, or whether it is martensite giving you a tempered martensite, or whatever transformation that whether a glass giving you a crystallization. All these transformations delta H can be found out by looking at various samples and finding out their calibration curves, and from the calibration curves you will be able to find out. So this is one way to find out the thermal history. And of course people also can measure the heat capacity by knowing how this delta H is changing as a function of temperature, looking at the slope of this, because you know that Cp is dH by dt, right? So if I can look at the slope of this particular thing, I will be able to find out how what is the Cp. So Cp of the material can also be found by looking at this Cp. But one has to remember what I am measuring is not the Cp of my material, because there is a reference also here. So what I am actually measuring is the Cp difference between my reference and my material. That information has to be remembered. So in principle, if I know the Cp of my reference material as a function of temperature, these are all available standard handbooks, so I can deduct that from this, and whatever I get, the difference will be the Cp of actual my sample that I am trying to be interested in. So these are all one of the things that one can do, and people regularly. And similar Kissinger plots can be plotted even in this case also, whether it is a DSC or DTA, and you get the same information. Of course one can also do isothermal transformation. What I can do is I can take this sample, heat it to a particular, my reference, my sample, heat it to a particular temperature, hold it as a function of time now, and find out how the phase is evolving as a function of time. Let's say if I have alpha to gamma transformation, I heat it to 910 degrees centigrade, I hold it there and find out as a function of time how this alpha changes to gamma. And as alpha changes to gamma, there is an enthalpy that is released or absorbed depending on what is higher, what is lower. Usually gamma being a high temperature phase, the enthalpy of gamma is higher than the enthalpy of alpha, and as a result when alpha is becoming gamma, then there is a heat absorbed. And I can look at this, and from this I will be able to find out what is called fraction transform, because you can see at each of these times what you are seeing is some amount of alpha is transforming into gamma. So from this plot I will be able to, this is the start of transformation, this is the end of transformation. This is like our seeker. In principle I can do this kind of seekers. Start of transformation, end of transformation at a particular temperature. These 2 points can be found out here. And if I do it over a function of temperature, various temperatures, I can actually generate my seeker. So the TTT curves can be generated simply by using DSC, which is isothermal DSC. But one point that one has to remember is, when I am doing isothermal DSC, I have to heat my sample very rapidly up to the transformation temperature, so that during this heating nothing is happening. This is very important. If you remember, when I am doing a TTT curve for austenite to pearlite, gamma giving pearlite, what am I doing? I am taking this alloy, heating it. If you remember this thing, for example, if this is my alloy, or if this is my alloy, okay, I am quenching this alloy to a particular temperature in a salt bath or something like that, so that during this particular transformation nothing is happening, and holding this alloy, if this is my A3 temperature or A1 temperature, for the sake of eutectoid steel, A1 temperature is what we talk about. So I take the alloy above the A1 temperature, quench it to this temperature and holding it there, and then finding out what is the, at what time what has formed, and finding out from this what is the time required for the start, time required for the finish of the perlite. So we usually take a large number of samples, hold them, all of them, quench it to various temperatures, and what we make sure is that during this transformation, wherever temperatures I am coming, during this nothing has happened. If something has already nucleated, all my kinetics that I am getting are going to be wrong, because already some nucleation has taken place during this. Similarly, when I am trying to do the reverse process, I should make sure that no gamma has formed during heating, so that the alpha remains as alpha until you reach this particular temperature and start holding. And what is this period? This is period is what we call it as incubation period. Like this period. At a given temperature, this is our incubation period. So this is the incubation period, start of transformation, end of transformation, and one can find out all this. So these are all possible, whether it is isothermal, and we can get the whole isothermal kinetics from such a transformation. The next thermal analysis system, which is very popular, is what we call as what is called dialectometry, which has become very popular, which, as the name suggests, what it measures is changes in volume or length as a function of temperature. And what do we use it for? If you want to know the coefficient of thermal expansion of certain materials, how do materials expand as a function of temperature, if you want to know, we can use this for the finding out the thermal expansion. We can also use it for particularly powder metallurgy. People regularly use this for finding out what is called sintering behavior. For example, if I take powder and do some kind of let's say green compaction, these are all powder particles. Let's say I have green compacted, I have some holes here, these are all the porosity, and if I heat it, this porosity is going to be filled, and during this porosity filling, when this metal is trying to flow into this, you will see that if I am starting from certain particular height or certain volume, there is a volume shrinkage, because the density is increasing. So the green density, if it is about 60%, when this moves towards 100%, what you see is there is a volume shrinkage. So I can measure how the shrinkage is happening as a function of temperature in a dialectometer, and from that find out what is called the sintering kinetics. So regularly most of the people who are working with the powder metallurgy find out what should be my sintering temperature. If I want to find out, I should simply take such a green compacted for something, put it into dialectometer, where you take a small compact and measure, heat it at a particular heating rate dt by dt, and then as a function of heating rate, when you heat it, you try to measure how this particular height is changing of the sample as a function of temperature, and plot this, the H, or people also plot it as DH, delta L by L, how the change in the length versus the original length as a function of temperature. And if it is a sintering, you would possibly see something like that. There is a shrinkage. Up to certain temperature, you see that the shrinkage is very, very small. That means no sintering has taken place. And beyond a particular temperature, you suddenly see. And this kind of thing, if you find out what is this temperature for a given material, I can use that information and do all my sintering studies at that particular temperature or within that short temperature domain, so that I get the best sintering kinetics within that domain. So this is another technique which we use regularly. With this, we will close this thermal analysis techniques and take up some basic features of materials characterization based on certain data that is available, and try to understand how materials characterization can be used to understand the materials behavior.